As this should be done. We are a week from Sunday. We are doing a class on how you can share your faith. It's a class on, we call it 401. It's in the growth track. Some of you are in different classes that we offer for you to be able to grow. It's going to be a week from Sunday. It is, strategically, coincidentally, the Sunday before Easter. Because we want you to be able to enjoy, and I did use that word, enjoy sharing your faith with people. In fact, the Bible teaches in the book of Philemon that there are experiences of joy that you will never experience if you're a follower of Jesus, if you have never shared your faith with somebody else. And so we're going to show you how to do that without being obnoxious or pushy or any of that stuff that you kind of think in your head about people sharing their faith. We also provide lunch and we provide childcare. So if you went on the back of your connection card, you see where it says sign me up for it, just check class 401 and we'll reserve you a spot a week from Sunday. Also, one of the ways that we share our faith, in fact, the way that all of us who are followers of Jesus want to share our faith is through baptism. And can I ask, Nick, we do not have the baptism video, right?
No.
All right. So let me just say, and I'll try to say it demonstratively, so it looks, engaging, since we don't have the video, is I want to encourage you, if you've never been baptized, it is the first step of obedience. Is the first step. If you have asked Jesus to take over your life and you're following Him, there is nothing you need to do before you get baptized. And we're going to do that here in the pool over here. It's our second time. So if you've never been baptized, I would encourage you to follow Jesus in that obedience. Again, check off, I'm ready to be baptized. Baptism is a celebration of new birth. Spiritual new birth. But speaking of new birth, how many days old is our youngest member? Your world record here, Guy. How many days?
13.
13 days. All right. You're the new world record. You're not going to be the 13-day-old North Star attendant. We're very excited for you guys. Hey, this is going to be unique today, I promise. If you are here for the very first time, we are typically, not always, but typically, the teaching is via video. And so we have a teaching team, and you may think this is us, but actually there's about 2,500 of us spread across 4 different counties in Bay and Escambia County, and we have an online campus that literally goes all over the world. There are people in Iraq and Iran and Jersey and all sorts of crazy places right now experiencing church with us, with you. But every once in a while, when you press the play button, it doesn't play. So, Nick and I, who are the pastors here, we do this kind of welcome service coordination thing, and whoever does this, we always watch the video beforehand to really, because when you're busy doing things, sometimes it's hard to really be open to what God might be saying to you, and so we always do that. And the deal is if we ever press play and it doesn't work, whoever did this gets to preach the sermon. So, you get to hear the sermon from me today. And I am just as excited to hear it as you are, because I have no idea what's going to happen. Alright? So, let's pray. And before we pray, actually, if you would pull out your message notes, these are going to be a big help to you. And I think to me as well, actually. So let me open this in prayer again. God, we are so grateful for your Spirit and your power. We are so grateful for your word. And Lord, all we ask, all we want, every week, all we want, is we want people to see the beauty of who you are and your love for them and your greatness and holiness. And God, we thank you for your word. And so we ask that you would empower your word today. As I speak, I pray that what you want to say to every one of us will be clear, and that we will do what you want us to, so our lives will be changed. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we're continuing a series called Stand about a guy named Daniel and some of his friends in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. And so this is the second story, and this is going to get a little freaky, Okay, so I just want you to be prepared. All right? So let's look at your notes, and we're going to start in Daniel chapter 10. And here's what it says. This is speaking of Daniel. Daniel says, I looked up and saw a man dressed in linen clothing with a belt of pure gold around his waist. His body looked like a precious gem. His face flashed like lightning, and his eyes flamed like torches. His arms and feet shone like polished bronze, and his voice roared like a vast multitude of people. Okay, so I just want, this is not fiction. Okay, this is history. And this happened in an actual moment in time, thousands of years ago in Persia. And so Daniel, who was a follower of God, had this experience. He saw this man who looked and sounded like this. And I'm going to explain a little bit more why this was happening to him. And look at verse 7. It says, only I, Daniel, saw this vision. The men with me saw nothing, but they were suddenly terrified and ran away to hide. Like a bunch of little girls. No offense against little girls, right? So I was left there all alone to see this amazing vision. If you follow Jesus, and maybe you've never made a decision to follow Jesus, maybe you're just kind of checking this out, but I want to let you know something. God is a God who knows you particularly. I know there are some billion people on this earth, but God is such a God of greatness and omnipotence that at this moment He sees you, and He knows you, and He knows every need that you're going through. He knows every feeling that you're having at this moment. What are you feeling at this moment? Like when you came here today, you brought baggage, didn't you? Experiences and fears and struggles. And God saw you, and He felt what you felt, and He cares about what you're feeling and what you need. And so some of the time, He will speak to you, He will touch your life in a way that no one else will be able to understand. I preach some of the time, and I teach, and I'll get done, and people will come up to me and say, wow, that was so great. God, this is what really, and they go into this 5-minute dissertation, and it's nothing I said. Like none of that bears no resemblance whatsoever to anything I said. Because the Spirit of God knew that they needed something. And He spoke to them. Now, people have heard the audible voice of God. But not typically, not always, certainly not all the time. But God will say things to you through His Word. And as some of the time as you're singing and as you're seeking Him and when you come together, He will speak to you. And here's what you have to be aware of. You will try to explain it to someone. And I don't want you to be discouraged when they don't get it. Some of the time, you will go to someone, and maybe you've been in your own personal time with God. And maybe there was something that you read that just was so powerful, and you knew that He wanted you to change and do this thing. And you go to tell somebody, and they're kind of nodding and smiling their head, right? They don't get it. But you know why? Because they are not you. Just like Daniel's friends didn't have the experience, even though they were in the same room, it was because God was doing something unique. See, we're not in a religion where you check off these 6 boxes, and if you do these 4 things, and God just kind of spits you out on the other end looking like Jesus. It doesn't work that way. He wants to speak to you and work in your life in a very, very unique way. And I want you to know, whatever it is that you came in with, whatever you were feeling, whatever you were afraid of, whatever you were anxious about, God knows exactly where you are. And He wants to work in your life in a unique way. Some of the time you have things you're passionate about, like some great cause. And you just don't, you get ticked off at people because they're not as passionate as you are about it. And that's okay. Because God made you that way. And so you just have to be faithful to what God has said to you. Let's continue to read. Daniel 10, verse 8. So Daniel had this vision of this man. And he said, my strength left me. My face grew deathly pale, and I felt very weak. Then I heard the man speak. And when I heard the sound of his voice, I fainted and lay there with my face on the ground. There are times when you are seeking God that he will overwhelm you. Now, it won't always happen the way that you anticipated that it will. In fact, some of you, you've never had an experience like this. When you were seeking God and you were just completely overwhelmed by his presence and his goodness and his greatness. But I promise you, if you continue to seek him, you will. I would say the greatest experience of worship that I ever had in my life was not in a church service. I've been in the Georgia Dome with tens of thousands of people worshiping God together, and it was extraordinary. And I have been in times of prayer that were just amazing. But the greatest experience of worship I've ever had in my life was in the neurological ICU in Columbia Medical Hospital in Manhattan. I had just suffered 7 strokes in a 24-hour period of time and survived. That's a whole nother story, all right? But most people, nobody thought I would live. No, let alone, stuff would, like I could tell my arm to do this and it would. Right? As far as I know, we've only found 3. Like, I've never found anybody in my research that survived more than 3 major strokes and is still alive. But God answered the prayers of about 10,000 people. It's astounding how kind of the word spread and things happen. About 10,000 people prayed for me. And it was amazing. Like, when I came out of the 7th stroke, the last stroke was about an hour and a half. But what happened was the oxygen was cut off to my brain for an hour and a half. And when I came out of it, it's a long story, but when I came out of it, the doctor, who's one of the top 2 or 3 neurologists in the world, started doing these tests. And so he said, take your finger and touch it to your nose. And I did. And he just looked at me and he went, unbelievable. And then he put his hand against my foot, and he said, press against my hand. And I pressed against his hand, and he looked at the nurse and went, unbelievable. And seriously, he did that for like 15 minutes. And because this guy does it, it's as if I had fallen into a pool for an hour and a half, and then just walked out and I was fine. And so it kind of came to the point where it looked like I wasn't going to die, maybe. And they had intubated me. That means they put me on life support, and they'd given me no medication or anything, which is really like what you're supposed to do. But finally they extubated me, which means they took me off life support. And I remember laying in the ICU, and I thought, I had walked up to the edge of eternity. And I got to the door, and I put my hand on the door, and I turned the knob, and I almost entered into God's presence. And at the last moment, Jesus put his hand on me and pulled me back. Or my wife would have been a widow, my children would have grown up with no father. And here's what overwhelmed me. And this description is the best description in words of what I experienced. I realized that had I stepped into the presence of God, who is a consuming fire, he is a God of absolute perfection, and he cannot be in the presence of sin. And I am a sinful person. And if I had stood before this God of complete and absolute, utter, devastating perfection and righteousness, a perfect, holy judge, I would have stood in his presence, and he would have embraced me. Despite all of my sin and my self-righteousness and my pride and my arrogance and he would have embraced me. Because all of the sin that I'd ever committed had been forgiven because Jesus paid for it on the cross. And I laid in that ICU, and I had no idea what was going to happen, if I was going to live or die. But I realized that somehow, if I had died, I would have been welcomed into the presence of God. And it was an absolutely overwhelming, I don't know how to describe it except I faded and lay there with my face like that. I was to the ceiling. I wasn't allowed to turn over. You know, it says in the Bible that in the presence of God there is fullness of joy. And we're so distracted by our feelings, our flesh, our cravings. We're so distracted by the world around us. We're so distracted by the enemy, Satan. And so, to the degree that you experience God's presence in your life is the degree to which you will experience fullness of joy. And so I want to encourage you above everything else, as best you can, to seek God, to seek to know Him in a deeper way. This is our bottom line today. Would you jot this down? And this is so important to understand. To stand in faith, I have to trust the heart of God. Would you jot that down? To stand in faith, I have to trust the heart of God. Because the reality is if I see God as this like old dude with a baseball bat, and He is just waiting for me to screw up so He can beat me down. Because some of the way we feel that way, like God is holy and perfect, and He doesn't want me to have any fun. And the reality is that I have to trust His heart. He loves me. He cares for me. I'm going to give you one phrase, and this phrase is everything about Christianity. It's 4 words, and it's everything. Are you ready? Maybe you want to jot these 4 words down. Jesus can be trusted. There is no decision you'll ever make, there is no experience you'll ever have that will not be resolved with that reality, that Jesus can be trusted. And we're going to come against times. We're going to come against times when we are down, when it seems like God is silent, when it seems like God's not answering our prayers. I wonder how many of you, we were talking about this in my small group a couple Mondays ago. How many of you have ever prayed for something and God didn't answer it right away? Right? Yeah. And those of you who are not raising your hand is because you thought I was giving a rhetorical question, right? God is not He's not a vending machine, right? But here's the problem. We were talking about this in my group, that the longer it goes when I ask God to do something for me that He doesn't answer my prayer, the more it feels like He doesn't care. I'll be honest. Like I just this last year, there was this 7-month prayer that my family had, and God could have solved it in a moment. He waited 7 months. And the longer it was, the longer it went, the harder it was for me to continue to really believe that Jesus could be trusted and that He cared. And every one of us, we face these kinds of situations when our life is difficult and we have to stand. But how do you stand if you feel like, but God's abandoned me? And like people in the Bible, like if you read the Psalms, these guys are like, God, where are you? I'm crying to you and you're not listening to me. How far are you? These are guys that write in the Bible feeling this way. We all go through times like this. Because you know what? God doesn't want to be a vending machine. He wants to be a God who we understand loves us and walks through difficult times with us. So I want to give you 3 things to remember when you need to stand in faith. When you're trusting God is just struggling a bit. And we all get there. Don't let anybody tell you they don't ever struggle in their faith. We all do. 3 things. Number 1, this is where it all starts. You have to understand that God cares about you more than you do. God cares about you more than you do. And some of you care about yourself a lot. So Daniel is having this vision. Look what it says in verse 10. It says, just then a hand touched me and lifted me, still trembling to my hands and knees. And the man said to me, Daniel, you are very precious to God. So listen carefully to what I have to say to you. Stand up for I have been sent to you." When he said this to me, I stood up, still trembling. When I was growing up, I kind of grew up like in the church, and at least around the church. And I was terrified to tell God I would do anything He wanted me to. There's this verse in Romans 12. It talks about giving yourself as a living sacrifice to God. I hated that verse. Because I knew it meant, like, I would say, okay, God, you can be trusted, and whatever you ask me to do, I will do. I was terrified to say that to God. Here's why. When I graduated from high school, all right, my parents accepted God's call to be missionaries in Mali, West Africa. So like some kids, when they graduate high school, they leave home. Well, when I graduated, my parents left home. And I'm not talking across the street, I'm talking like, like new continent, all right? And I was convinced if I told God I would do anything He wanted me to, He would make me go to Africa. Because that's what my parents were doing. And that was just not on my list of fun things to do with my life. Even my parents, I was so terrified as a kid, someday I'd open National Geographic, and there my mom and dad would be. My mom would probably have no shirt on, I love National Geographic, all right? So I'm just like, this is not for me. And so it was really, really funny. My last 2 years of high school, I was living in South Florida, and my parents wanted to go to the mission field in Africa, but it's a whole long story that they ended up going to Mendenhall, Mississippi. Okay? Yeah, I didn't figure it out either. And so they said, "Hey, Roy, if you'd like to continue to eat and sleep for free, you'll come too." So I did. So I was not a super popular kid at all. Like the high school I was in Florida was like 1,000, 2,000, and I was definitely not in the in crowd, all right? But I always wanted to be. And so I got to this high school and it was like 450 kids. And I thought, wait a minute, these kids, they know nothing about me. And this was before they had invented the internet, so it was good for me. I thought, if I can arrive at this school and I can pretend I am the coolest kid that has ever lived on the planet. And they have no way of not knowing that's true. So I did. I just showed up and I just acted like I was like the most popular, coolest kid that ever existed. And they bought it! Serious. Like, when I graduated from high school, I was literally voted most popular, funniest. I was the senior class president and the student body president at the same time. I would have meetings with myself. I'd be like, well, the student body president thinks we should do this. What does the senior class president think? Well, I'm right with you, Roy, absolutely. So like I spent 2 years in my little, high school tiny brain trying to be popular. And I was. And the week after I graduated from high school, that's when my parents accepted God's call to Africa. So I got in a car and I drove to, actually had this couple acres on the Swanee River. And so we went down there to build like this big barn for my parents to put all their stuff in before they went to Africa. So I want you to think about this. In 1 week, I went from all the parties, all my friends, like all this stuff that I had tried to do and achieve. In 1 week, I went from all of that to hello, tree. It was just out in the woods, like building some barn. And I thought, this really stinks. Like, am I going to spend the rest of my life working really hard to get what I want and get it, and then it's like gone in a week? And so I really began to struggle with what I was doing with my life. And here's the key. That summer, I began to read the Bible for myself. And as I read it, I didn't do it big research. I would just read it. I think I started in Proverbs. And I would just read it and I would say, God, I'm going to read your word and I want you to speak to me. And what I mean by that is God would say things, like something that I read would just really stand out and I would know, wow, that's what I should do. Or that was something I needed to know in my life right then. And so during the whole summer, I was lost everything. I'm disillusioned with, I got it all, but now it's gone. And here's what really ticked me off. This really ticked me off, is my dad. My dad was a security analyst. I don't know if you know what that means. He worked for Merrill Lynch and some of these brokerage firms, and he would tell people how to invest their money. And he was really good at it. My dad could be rich anytime he wanted to be. He just didn't want to be. It just had no appeal to him. So he's literally going to go live in a grass shack in a village in the suburbs of Timbuktu. Literally. And he's so stinking happy about it. Like, he could have everything that the world said would make him happy, and he didn't want it. And I had worked so hard to everything like my little high school universe said would make me happy, and I was stinking miserable. So I'm going through all of this, and I remember one day I was about to jump off a bridge. All right, now the water was about this far from the bridge, and I wasn't killing myself. I was just swimming. It was my dad, right? And so I was on this bridge, and I was about to jump off. And I didn't hear the audible voice of God, but it was much clearer than that, is the only way I can describe it. And it was funny, I was actually, I told the story to a couple of you here, like in this very room a couple Sundays ago. And I remember God asked me 3 questions. And his first question was, Roy, who's smarter, me or you? I thought about it. I said, yeah, probably God. God's probably smarter than I am. I'll give you that one, God. Here's the second question. Roy, who loves you more? Me or you? And I thought about what Jesus had done on the cross. That God became a man and he suffered and he literally died and took my sin and suffered on the cross for me. And if I look at that, I have to admit, you know what? God probably loves me even more than I love myself. And here's the third question. This is a question that revolutionized my life. God said, okay, boy, if I'm smarter than you are, and I love you even more than you love yourself, who can run your life better? And there's only one sane, rational answer to that question, right? If God loves me more than I love myself and is smarter than I am, then he has to be able to run my life better than I can. And it's the same for you. It's the same for you. You see, Jesus can be trusted. God cares about you more than you do. Let's look at number 2. Here's the second thing to remember. If you want to jot this down, God is doing more than you understand. God is doing more than you understand. Okay, now, here's what we're going to do. There's stuff behind this curtain, okay? There's stuff going on back here that you don't know about that kind of makes this, fancy North Star Church thing show up there, right? There's stuff going on behind the scenes that you would never dream about that makes the world happen. Now, in this passage, God pulled aside the curtain so Daniel could see something. It says, then he, speaking of this angelic being, then he said, don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you began to pray for understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your request has been heard in heaven. I have come in answer to your prayers, but for 21 days the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia blocked my way. Then Michael, one of the archangels, came to help me, and I left him there with the spirit of the prince of Persia. All right. There is a physical reality that we all live in, but there is a spiritual reality that exists. And this is behind the curtain. Daniel began to pray that God would show him something as he was seeking God. And in just a moment, I'll just mention it now. He wasn't just praying, he was praying and fasting. In fact, in verse 3, if you want to go back and read this in your Bible sometime, it says this 21 days, he did not eat any meat, he did not drink any alcohol, and he did not eat any, I believe it was leavened bread, bread that rises, and it was called sweet bread, which is kind of like dessert and bread that rises. Okay? So it's called fasting. I'll talk about it in just a moment. But for 21 days, he was praying and fasting that God would show him something that he was seeking God for. And look what it says. From the first day you began to pray, God heard his prayer. But in this spiritual world, when the angel came to give the explanation, there was a battle. There was a literal spiritual battle that went on for 21 days until Michael the archangel came so this person could come and could answer Daniel's prayer. That's not science fiction, it's reality. And prayer, the most powerful thing you will ever do at any moment in your life, is pray. When I work, I work. When I pray, God works. You see, let me just say this. Nick, have we ever not been able to make the video work? Ever?
No.
Okay, this is the first time. I can tell you, as they were preparing for all the campuses, they had more difficulties, at least to my knowledge, that has ever happened as we were preparing to try to do this message. I was not at all surprised, because this is the most spiritually focused message. And what we're going to ask you to do is probably to take a step that will more deeply affect your spiritual life and the spiritual world than anything we've ever asked you to do. And there has been opposition. There's absolutely been opposition. But greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. And so what God intends to happen, despite, the videos that don't go when we press play and all the other stuff that happens, I can tell you that God is going to accomplish exactly what He wants to accomplish. And let me give you our specific challenge to you today. We are challenging every person in our congregation today. And maybe you're just visiting, maybe you're kind of checking things out. I would encourage you to at least give this a try or at least consider it. We're going to challenge you for the next 21 days, beginning today until Easter, to fast and pray and seek God. Now, the general thing that we're going to ask you to pray about is that we will be empowered to reach more people than we have ever reached, ever in our history on an Easter. And we're going to do that together. We're going to pray together. And I want to encourage you, I want to invite you to fast together. So you may want to write this down. You say, well, okay, what are we going to fast from? There's like a 26-page booklet or something that you can go to that gives all the details. Go to northstar.cc/stand. Okay, because it's a message stand. And Nick, did we have some of them printed out for those who do not have internet access? Did we have some physical copies?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so we'll have some next week if you don't have internet access. But what we're going to do is, I'd like you to go to northstar.cc/stand. And see, it'll explain why, it'll explain the details. But here's what I want to challenge you to do. I want to challenge you to fast and pray for 21 days for two things. One, I'd like you to fast and pray that God will help us and empower us to reach more people than we ever have before on Easter. But I want you to do something else. I believe that there are things in your life right now that you've been praying about, and you've been asking God to do something. And maybe you're discouraged, or maybe it's just gone on for a long time. I want you to focus for these 21 days as you fast and pray. Ask God to answer that prayer. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's for somebody that you know. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. On the back of your connection card, why don't you pull out your connection card right now, on the back of your connection card, I want to ask you to write the number 21 and what that prayer request is. Now, every week when you write a prayer request down, Nick and I, your pastors, we pray for you. But this time, for these 21 days, Pastor Marty, our lead pastor, many of our other pastors, the staff, we are all going to pray in a concerted effort for these next 21 days as we pray and fast for you and this prayer request that you have been bringing before God. Because there are some things that God will not do until we ask Him. And as a person who is not dead after 7 strokes, I can tell you there are things that God wants to do that He will not do until we ask Him together. So, I want to ask you to do 2 things right now. Put the number 21 and your prayer request on the back of your connection card. And I would also like to challenge you to write the word fast. If you will, prayerfully consider fasting with us. Now, the reason I say prayerfully consider is because you really need to know the details of it. You can go and find out what the details are. And if there's any concern that you might have medically, you definitely want to talk to your doctor. But trust me, it's a very, very actually healthy thing. It's not like we're fasting from everything, but who's this Twinkie? Okay? It will actually help you physically as well, although that's not the purpose. Okay, so 2 challenges. 21 and your prayer request. And write the word fast. If you will prayerfully consider, if you will join us in this 21-day fast. And let me show you why. And here's the third thing to remember. God's strength is made perfect through your weakness. God's strength is made perfect through your weakness. He said, Daniel said, how can someone like me, your servant, talk to you, my Lord? My strength is gone, I can hardly breathe, and the one who looked like a man touched me again. I felt my strength returning. Don't be afraid, he said, for you are very precious to God. Peace, be encouraged, be strong. About 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, about 6 weeks ago actually, usually when I teach, I get about 2 to 4 weeks to prepare. The series we did before this one was called Sabotage, and I actually did the opening message. I think it was about words, how our words sabotage. I wasn't supposed to teach that Sunday, but I got a call 22 hours before I had to stand on stage and not just teach, but to teach for all of our campuses. And so I prepared as best I could, and I'll be honest, I did some sleeping during those 22 hours. And I stood and I did the best that I could. On that one Sunday, 93 people accepted Jesus as their Savior. 93 people. That's absolutely unheard of. But you know what? God's strength is perfected through our weakness. Now, can you guess the only other time in my life I've been less prepared than then? Now, but let me tell you what's going to happen. Some of you are going to accept this challenge to pray and fast for 21 days. Some of you have never done that before. Some of you, maybe you've done something like it. But what is going to happen in your life over the next 21 days, people that are going to come to know Jesus on Easter 21 days from now, is going to be more and beyond anything you've ever experienced before. You know why? Because God's strength is perfected. It's brought about to its greatest fruition in our lives through our weakness. Why? Because you know what? You know what I'm relying on up here? Pretty much Jesus. Because I wasn't ready for this. But you know what? Jesus